Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. Now, after the predictions, the petitions, the concerns, the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, has presented the 2024 budget. But can we describe this budget as a budget that would aid the much talked about economic recovery, or a budget that can be described as business friendly? Well, tonight we should have had the Deputy Minister of Finance, Abdulnasir Asare, in studio with us here for a discussion on the budget, but due to circumstances beyond her control, her appearance would not come on as scheduled and planned. But this program will go on as we want to look at the 2024 budget. Can it be described as business friendly? Yaolate is a partner at accounting firm Deloitte, and Professor Lord Mensah, he is a financial economist. We'll be engaging the views of these experts to get their thoughts about the budget and whether indeed it can aid in the growth of businesses. Take a short break and we will be right back. And welcome to PM Express Business Edition as we still focus our discussion on the 2024 budget. And as earlier on explained and tried to render an apology, the Deputy Minister of Finance, Abdulnasir Asare, should have joined us in studio here for a discussion on the budget. But due to circumstances beyond her control, she can't make it for the program. But we go on today and still have a discussion on the budget to look at whether it can be described as business friendly with respect to the policy measures that government has outlined in the budget. Can we describe this 2024 budget as business friendly, or indeed there are still a lot of challenges in this document that we have to look at? Yaolate is a partner at accounting firm Deloitte. Professor Lord Mensah is a financial economist. We're trying to get some understanding from these two distinguished personalities on this budget and whether indeed it can aid in the growth of the private sector and help them contribute or make the right contribution to the economy. Prof, thank you so much for your time and your letter. Let me first start with Professor Lord Mensah. For you, were you surprised at the whole document or what the minister presented to Parliament yesterday, even though we had heard rumors about what will be done and what will not be done, and even what businesses has put forward in terms of what they wanted in this 2024 budget?
Yeah, well, good evening to our viewers out there. And if you can hear me, can you hear me loud?
I can hear you loud and clear, Professor Lord Mensah.
Okay, then. Thank you very much. Yes, so it is a budget. We're expecting the finance minister as required by the laws of the country. But I can tell you that, let me go straight to your point. I don't see the budget to be a business-friendly, budget. I mean, in a sense that if you look at the numbers that were churned out, the expenditure numbers and then the revenue numbers and the budget deficit, we can talk about all the policies, planting for food and jobs. We can talk about, the various flagship programs that government intends to roll out, during an election year as well. But then let's not forget that the deficit of the budget will shape the economy. And the reason why I'm saying that the deficit of the budget will shape the economy is in a sense that is where competition for funds between, the government and then businesses, comes in. Because government must finance this, deficit. And we are talking about 60 billion over 60 billion worth of deficit.
61 billion, yeah.
Yes, 61 billion deficit. And I ask myself, where would the money be coming from? A situation where, as a country, we've exhausted all avenues for financing, government machinery.
But Prof, I just want to ask you, for you, was it a surprise to you? And you're quite old enough, and I stand to be educated, where this country, and again, I choose my words carefully, whether we've in the history of this country, we've ever had a balanced budget or even a surplus budget. And maybe
Well,
the
it
economist
hasn't. We've
history
never.
and help me out. You were quite in terms of.
I'm not surprised anyway because there was a business as usual kind of budget where we read a budget with a deficit, and obviously a deficit that we'll be looking out for finance. But then, I mean, with the current situation we find ourselves in, I wasn't expecting that huge deficit. Even though in terms of our GDP per deficit, all right. So that is deficit per GDP ratio. Okay. We are doing around 5.8%, which is clearly, down compared to what we did last year. But then let's look at it in level terms, right? The quantums of money that we're supposed to finance from the economy. We are talking about the only avenue for financing being the treasury bills, right? And it's stated in the budget clearly that, we're going to use treasury bill to finance. Let me tell you, currently, government average issue of treasury bill on the market, which is highly concentrated in the 91 day, is around 3 billion, on the market, on the average. And even with that, we are struggling to bring interest rates down on the market because the banks are, channeling their funds into these treasury bills. And then we are talking about 60 billion in 2024. That brings to terms, if you divide, the 60 billion by 12, it tells you that every month government will go to the market to borrow around 5 billion. George, 3 billion, we are not able to bring interest rate down, right? How much more 5 billion? All the monies will be chasing, government, in the form of treasury bill investment. And as a result of that, bringing down the interest rate in the short term will become a problem. And so,
and for you, that is your concern that you don't see interest rates coming down anytime soon because of another large deficit we have to deal with next year.
Yes. So I was thinking, you see, government's position over the past, few years has been in such a way that they have always been in business, right? I always segregate the economy into three. We have businesses, we have individuals, and we have the government. And as we speak now, looking at the numbers in the economy, it's only the government that is doing all the business. It's government that is attracting all the necessary funds. All the funds are going into treasury bills. In this, when we talk about funds flow, right? In this economy, all the monies are going into what? Treasury bills. So I was expecting this budget to narrow the deficit, reduce the deficit, and that will call for a reduction in the financing because all our financing sources have been exhausted, with the exception of what? The T-bills market. And so by reducing the deficit, that would have, call for a small financing on the T-bills market. And by so doing, the banks will start looking into other, businesses to lend to. And especially when they have learned a lesson from the debt exchange that happened recently. Okay. So I was expecting the government to position itself in that manner, in such a way that, the funds will start flowing to the businesses.
Prof, if you can hear me, let's draw in the connection about how this will impact on businesses, since you're looking at whether this document or this 2024 budget is business friendly or not. So yes, you told us about interest rates, a big challenge there. What else should businesses be worried about going through this budget for you as a financial economist?
Well, another thing that we may have to look at is inflation target that was set by
15%.
15%. That is also overly ambitious, in a sense that we're looking at ending the year somewhere around 31.3%, right? Now, we're going into election year. If you look at the budget, right, and you break down the expenditure, you see how goods and services has been swelled up, right? And you've seen how capital expenditure has also been swelled up. That tells you that government is prepared to overspend in election year on, social policies, right? and then capital expenditure. And so this will, push inflation further, likely to push inflation further up. And by so doing, bringing down inflation to 15% will become a problem. And look at how we started this year. We started somewhere around 54 point something. It has taken us long about, 9 months to get it to somewhere around 38 point something percent. And looking at going into elections next year, we're going to do more spending. And so I'm wondering how we can bring down inflation from 31.3% as projected by the finance minister by the end of the year to the 15. And so from where I sit, it's not something that we should, be happy with when it comes to that projection. Another thing the businesses I think is on a positive side is the tax reliefs. But even the tax reliefs, I will not say they are new because most of them seem to be an existing, tax relief.
And Prof, since you've spoken about the tax issues, I just want you to hold on there because I also come back to you and get your thoughts about the IMF program and how that could help contain expenditure and ensure that we don't overrun or spend beyond what we plan in this program. Let me bring in Yaw Lartey. He is a partner at accounting and financial firm Deloitte. And Yaw, thank you so much for your time. There have been a lot of concerns about taxes. Now, let's do a quick critique of the whole tax policy measure of government, i.e. in this 2024 budget. What are your initial thoughts on that, please?
Okay, so thank you very much and good evening to you and to our viewers and listeners. So before the budget statement was read, we had engaged the business community. So we went through a comprehensive stakeholder consultation. In some of our stakeholder meetings, the minister was present. Deputy Minister of Finance, Abena Osei-Asare, was present. And we put all the concerns raised by business community together. And among the key concerns are, one, increase or potential increase in taxation. The business community said it was something that they were not looking forward to, and they were expecting government to take another look at it. The second was still around taxation, a review or the removal of certain taxes. So taxes such as e-levy, COVID levy, and other taxes that, in their view, have outlived their usefulness. So usually when these taxes are introduced, they are introduced to address a particular problem. So for instance, COVID levy was supposed to help us recover from the COVID. And so during COVID, you charge a COVID levy. It's something that everybody understands. E-levy came and then we're expecting a certain target. We could not meet the target. So those related taxes, we say when the taxes are introduced, they have what we call sunset provisions. They are supposed to end or be taken off after a certain period. Those sunset provisions we've got into the sunset provisions, but the sun is not setting on these taxes. So business community were asking that, look, some of these taxes that have got sunset clauses, we are still paying some of them at the ports to date. They've been there for about 10 years. Can we remove some of these taxes? The budget statement that was read, we didn't hear anything like that, and we didn't see anything like that. And then the third, which has been touched on a few minutes ago, is the cost of credit. So the progressive increase in the policy rate means that the average business person, or you and I as individuals, you are likely to borrow from a bank at not less than 30% because the policy rates are 30%. So unless you are the most credit-worthy person in the country, there's no way you borrow at less than 30%. So it's 35, 40, or even more. So if cost of credit, or we are putting measures that will reduce access to credit and also reducing the cost of credit, that will help. But then, as you know, government is borrowing or taking money from T-bills, and T-bill is the strongest and one of the key parameters for determining cost of credit. So if anybody will give money to a third party, they will look at what government will give them on T-bills or return on government security. The return on government security is high. I'd rather give to government than to give to you or to give to a business person. So all of these are things that businesses were expecting that we will take a look at and the budget will address them. But unfortunately, and I'm afraid the budget did not address them. All that said, and maybe on the other hand, on the flip side, I will say there are a few initiatives that must be commended. So in my view, I'll highlight some of the key initiatives that were highlighted in the budget that I think they are initiatives that should be commended.
Okay.
So the first one is our effort to address the green economy. So we have policies or introduction of taxes around electric vehicles and all. And then we also have our effort to address what we call import substitution or domestication, as you said historically. Some of the domestication policies are reduction of taxes on, let's say, manufacturing of sanitary pads, locally manufactured sanitary pads. So it is not just sanitary pads, but locally manufactured. What that means is that we are supporting the sanitary pad industry in Ghana, and we are also making sanitary pads accessible to the average girl child. Secondly, we also having tax policy around the manufacturing of local fabrics or textile, African fabric. I tell you, the people who are in this industry complain a lot, and their complaints have been around the fact that we are importing cheaper but low quality products or fabric from the countries that you can always mention, the China, the Indonesia, and other places. We are creating jobs in those countries at the expense of jobs in Ghana. So if you introduce taxes that are supposed to help or address the challenge in this sector, I think it's a welcome measure. And then other related measures that are supposed to support our local industry. For me, these are very good initiatives. But when you look at it broadly, the question you ask is, what is the impact of all these initiatives, the tax exemptions and waivers? What is the overall impact? I think it's minimal compared to what the impact would have been if we have taken some of the nuisance taxes or we had taken some measures to bring in additional revenue.
But then, Mr. Lartey, some will say that didn't government know all these things, per the engagement that they had with you and the exemptions that they should give to really impact businesses? What was these exemptions for? Was it just cosmetic or what?
Well, I mean, for me, and I understand where you are coming from. For me, I would say that it is an initiative that's supposed to get people's attention to something. A very good example is what the policy that were introduced around the green economy. What I call green economy is policies around the electric vehicles.
Electric vehicles for electric bus, commercial buses that are coming in. I mean, some would say that, yeah, again, Lartey, how many of the GPRTU members would go in for this in a country where we are now short sometimes of 20?
They are cosmetic.
Let me quickly bring in Professor Mensah, and I'll come back to you. I mean,
yes, sure.
Again, you ask yourself, how many people out there will go in for electronic bus, GPRTU members do this?
I think Yao is being economical with the words.
Or diplomatic.
Diplomatic, I think so. You see, we may have to appreciate, how taxes are introduced and the benefit we want to reap from it. Before you introduce taxes, you have to look at how vibrant the economy in that area is, because normally tax handles are thrown into areas of the economy, where you see a lot of economic activities. So we are talking about electric vehicles. And like you were asking, how many electric vehicles do we have in the country? And do we have enough infrastructure to accommodate these electric vehicles, where a bus can run on the highway up to a point where they have to change batteries here and there? We have not invested in that. So at what point do we introduce electric, vehicles? So I believe on that aspect, they are just cosmetics. I mean, like you put it there, just to decorate the budget, to give the signal that we are giving some, tax relief to, our citizens.
Let me come back to Yolati. Again, for you, with respect to these tax measures as well, what do you think was the rationale behind it? Because then, if it's just cosmetic, then what impact are you hoping to achieve? If you want to change a habit, maybe let's even start with the normal vehicles. And I stand to be corrected, because if it also, when you go through the actual document, you're going to see this thing. Because some are saying that the real impact where you want to change a behavior, these incentives might not do it.
Yeah, so and I agree. I mean, there are aspects that Prof would like to put as cosmetic. For me, the impact is infinitesimal, as in significant, insignificant, or too small. And that the waiver of taxes on electric vehicles and all of that are examples of that. But for me, I think we should look at it as an initiative that's starting a process. Because when we celebrated what we call Green Ghana Day, we had all these talk, conference, and stakeholder consultation that will be moving Ghana economy to a green economy. So this is an initiative that's supposed to start the conversation around that. And so that's the future of where we'll be going to. So very soon, the manufacturers of the vehicles that we are using will stop manufacturing them and start manufacturing electric vehicles. How prepared will you be in the next 5 years? So I think this is just an initiative, and it may not have significant impact now. Over and above that, I also want to comment about the part that I call domestication. So support of sanitary part. There's also an initiative on grant of import waiver for raw materials for the manufacturing or the assembly of locally manufactured vehicles. So the vehicles that are assembled in Ghana, George, I'm not sure whether you asked for the price of any of them before. You'll be amazed how expensive they are.
Oh, you're telling me, despite all the exemptions that are being granted, they are still expensive than the imported cars?
They are still expensive relative to what a Ghanaian will call a home-use vehicle.
Okay.
That is the vehicles that are imported, that are being used or slightly used vehicles.
Okay.
So anybody walking on the streets will ask for the cost of a Prado or a Land Cruiser that's locally assembled in Ghana. It's almost costing us twice as a Prado or a Land Cruiser that you import. So the question you're asking yourself is, why is the locally assembled vehicles more expensive? It's because, one, the import duty on the raw material and equipment that are used to manufacture are still expensive. So technically, what we are doing is what should have been done outside Ghana, we are just bringing it to Ghana and doing the same thing at the same price. So such initiative or something that supports the assembling of local vehicles in Ghana, it's a good initiative and will create jobs. I think what's important is for us to look beyond just the granting of exemptions on these materials. We also look at how we support them to establish, because there are other components that increase the cost of the manufacture of those vehicles. If we do not have the technical personnel here and we have to import technical people, or they have to get expatriates to come and work in those facilities, those increase the cost. And I think I would like to end by saying I have been seeing a bold initiative to address the problems that pushed us into the IMF program. The 4 problems that we mentioned before that took us to the IMF program. The first one being our low revenue base. In the budget, it was stated that properties have been identified. We have identified properties. So the question I ask myself is, if we have identified those properties and they have been marked, can we estimate how much we were expecting to get from property tax in this budget? So there should have been a line item that they are tasking all local authorities to identify their properties in their vicinity and tax them, making sure we are getting a particular target. If you don't meet your property rate target, you don't get your local assembly allocation. That would have been a challenge. You would have seen that people would have come to your house making and ensuring that you pay your property rate, because they don't get the allocation unless they meet their property rate target. And I think this is how other economies are doing and they are developing. The second is our slowdown in fiscal consolidation. How can we continue to be running a budget deficit year on year? And it's not as if the budget deficit is reducing, it is increasing or widening. So the fiscal consolidation is a situation where you are reducing your budget deficit year on year. Unfortunately for us, our budget deficit is widening. So our slowdown in fiscal consolidation, all the problems that push us to IMF, we are still seeing around. And then the last is our rising debt level. Obviously, we have come a long way. We have gone through the domestic restructuring, but the external creditors are still waiting on us to see how we manage our house before they come to conclusion on some of the things that we're expecting them to do. If you are still running a budget deficit, then it's probably going to be a challenge getting an external creditor to continue to give you some exemption, waiver, or even write-off on your debt. If we show to them that we are putting our house in order and we are doing the right thing, then obviously over time, they will accept certain concessions that we are expecting them to do so that we can have some relief to repay the debt over a longer period of time. I think if we are not bold to address some of these problems, then our problem will get exacerbated over time and we will still be running around in circles.
But Mr. Lata, just also to get quickly from you that if you go through the budget document and judging from previous instances as well, should we wait for the final statement to make a judgment on the reliefs and even the other new taxes or revisions that have been stated? Because some are saying that there appears to be some reviews or hikes, and that may be the abridged version or the statement might not give us those fine details. Should we close the door on the tax measures that has been announced in the budget, or we should wait for the final details, the appendix, to get all those fine details?
Yes, well, I think that's a very good question. And when the budget was read previously, when we mentioned e-levy, there was a lot of debate about how we're going to operationalize it. So it's the same thing. All these tax measures that have been outlined, it is the Act of Parliament which will give support and backing, legislative backing to these tax policies that will outline how they are going to be operationalized. So for me, where government was silent in the budget statement, the Act of Parliament should be clear. So for instance, we said we have identified the properties. The properties that have been identified in Ghana, if there are 12 million of them or 15 million of those properties, what rates are going to be applied? So if the property that's located in what we call a prime area, the rate should not be the same as a property that's located in my village. So if we have all these things outlined in the Act of Parliament, it will help the authorities implement them clearly. You know, the challenge we had with e-levy was operationalization. When does it apply? When does it not apply? How many times can you pay the levy the same day? All these questions were there, and we hadn't addressed them, but we introduced them. So in the same way, all these policies have been outlined, but obviously the tax policy document and the Act of Parliament that will pass will outline that and will help us understand how these things are going to be actioned or operationalized, so that we have a benefit overall. Because what we are doing as supporting domestic industry may be cosmetic, as you said before, but if you apply them properly, you will get a benefit. But if you do not apply them properly, then obviously it will only be a theory thing.
But Mr. Latte, if you look at the whole tax policy measure of government in this document, the reliefs and the reviews and the revisions and all the rest, and for a businessman out there, would you see these tax policy measures as business friendly, or rather creates more uncertainty for businesses going into next year?
So I would say in principle that there are taxes that you consider because your taxes are either progressive or regressive or retrogressive.
Yeah.
So if your taxes that you have or some of your existing taxes are retrogressive, then you amend them, you review them. Unfortunately, some of the taxes that we considered government described some years ago as nuisance, they are still there. And so we still have retrogressive policies that are still there. But if you want to be progressive, we should introduce exemptions like we've done, but the exemptions that have got significant impact on certain industries. So we should not just apply the exemptions. And I think one of the points I've made is that our exemption regime should be reviewed. The exemptions review were granted at a certain time. So for instance, we granted exemption at the time when we had not found oil. The players in the oil industry were given exemption because we wanted them to come and take the risk. Today, we found oil in commercial quantities. Why do we still have exemption regime for that sector? The same thing, the mining sector. At the time we granted exemption, there were not that many mining companies in Ghana. Today, there's even Galamsey men that are making money. Why do we still have exemption regime in the mining sector? So some of these exemptions that we granted in the past, they were for a particular purpose and for a particular period. So if today those reasons are no longer tenable, we should review them. If the reasons are still tenable, we keep them. But if the reasons for which we are granting the exemptions are no longer tenable, then it calls on us to review. And we have to be bold to review those policies. And I think I like the Minister of Finance's quote in Timothy that we should not have the spirit of fear or timidity, but of a sound mind. And so we should be bold. We should not have the spirit of fear or timidity. We should be bold to review some of these policies.
Indeed, interesting, be bold. This is PM Express Business Edition as we look at whether this budget is business friendly or not. I'm engaging Professor Lord Mensah. He is a financial economist, and Yao Lartey, he is a partner at Deloitte. We'll take a short break, and when we are back, we're going to look at the IMF program and whether it has those measures to check overruns and ensure that the business environment is conducive for enterprises out. My name is George Afi. Take a short break, and we will be right back. Is the 2024 budget business friendly, or rather complicate the current challenges that most businesses out there are facing? I'm engaging Yao Lartey. He's a partner at Deloitte, and Professor Lord Mensah. He is a financial economist, getting the thoughts of these two distinguished personalities on the 2024 budget and whether indeed it could aid the growth of the private sector as government was talking about, or rather it could rather complicate their current challenges that they are going through. Mr. Lartey, let me come back to you quickly before I move to Professor Lord Mensah. You engage a lot of businesses out there. Are they worried that, listen, the release that they were looking for, not just about taxes, but even the whole budget document, they are not going to get it, and how that could complicate issues for them going forward?
Thank you very much, George. So I think I'll look at it in the context of what some of the watchers have reported, and those are reflected in the concerns of businesses. So I've discussed the issue about taxes, and business have been concerned and have raised concerns about taxes. The second thing that I would also like to touch on is the risk that Ghana may not meet some of the conditionality set out for us after the IMF review our program and our performance to date. What that means is that the tranche of funds that we're expecting may delay, and it has implication on our reserves and the potential exchange rates effects on us. Because anytime we get our reserves or we get a tranche released to us, we show up our reserves, and it has impact on the local currency. So as we speak, we are not too sure what the review was, whether we passed the test, and whether the test that we
government claims that they are hoping to get an MOU from these bilateral external creditors possibly this week or before the board meets on November 22. That's what government claims. You don't buy that assurance from government.
It's not that we don't buy the assurance. It's the key risk for a lot of businesses, and it's a key concern for us, because any potential delay in that has other implications on businesses. So we are very much concerned about that, and we all pray that we'll be able to pass that test and we'll be able to get that MOU signed. Because our external creditors, mind you, we have not completed the debt restructuring process, particularly on the external front. So we've made significant progress on the domestic front, but on the external front, particularly on the private sector side. So our bilateral creditors have arranged some form of agreement, but the private sector clients or creditors, the Eurobond holders, are still waiting for us to put our house in order. So if you miss that, we are going to run into problems. And I think those are headwinds that are staring at us that we should be mindful of. The third point I want to raise is the increasing political activity, which is likely to affect the business of government. It has started already. Parliamentarians who want to be re-elected, and they are working towards getting re-elected. Our political activity really affects the business of government. So in instances where you want parliamentarians to be in parliament to pass certain laws or legislation,
campaigning.
I'm sure you go to parliament. You know how difficult it is to even find some of them because they want to be really elected. And I think this is something that has been highlighted by the International Economic Intelligence Unit. And I think that's something that we should be concerned about. The others are the effect of external pressures like what's going on currently in the Middle East, and then obviously Russia, Ukraine. But these have moderate impact on our economy. I think some of the points that I've mentioned about taxes, about the fact that political activity will affect the business of government, and about us passing the IMF test and ensuring that we are consistently getting the disbursements. Because we know that we do not have access to the international credit market again. We do not have access to the international capital markets. In periods where before Christmas, you get a tranche of an euro bond and we all get excited.
And even if you go through the budget itself, government sees the IMF tranche disbursement or inflows as a critical external source of funding for its operations.
For a fact. So if your critical source of funding, you don't ensure or you don't go through the test and pass appropriately or adequately, you are going to have challenges down the road. And the last is the two related problem of inflation and depreciation of the local currency. As you know, one is dependent on the other. Why? Because in our economy, significant proportion of our inflation is import-driven, what we call imported inflation. So if you address the problem of depreciation of local currency, you are indirectly addressing part of your inflationary problem. So sustained inflation or heightened inflationary pressures affect businesses because the cost of production is increasing. If the cost of production is increasing, the cost of your output is increasing, and whatever you are selling to the market is high, then inflation becomes very high. So heightened inflationary pressure is something that you should address. And one of the ways that you can address your exchange rate problem.
Prof, let me bring in Prof. For you, Prof. Mensah, you think that we cannot afford not to get this deal or this MOU for us to go to the board and get this next tranche quickly approved for us?
Yeah, so we needed, we need this IMF, inflows badly. And I can tell you that is the only source of inflow, together with this cocoa syndicated loan, that we can be sure, to shore up, our forex buffer, to meet up the seasonal pressures of, the dollar demand. And then also, going forward, how businesses, if we are to serve, our debt as a country, how we can pay our debt through using the dollar. So I would say that, yes, indeed, we need this money. But then looking at the measures being put in place and then also the negotiations that we are having, you see, we shouldn't take for granted how diversified our external creditors were, as of the time we're borrowing from them. I mentioned some time ago that is going to some way, somehow delay, our negotiations. The finance minister bulldozes his way through when it comes to the domestic
debt exchange program,
debt exchange. But you're not going to get it that way, when it comes to the external, creditor negotiations. These are investors who understands, investment very well. They know the kind of risk that you pose, as a country, and they know whether after the debt restructuring you'll be able to pay or not. They have a lot of information, and especially when you've been downgraded and then recently you were moved up to triple C. These are all signals that you are in the junk zone, and for a country to be in a junk zone, the ability to pay your debt is very, very, small. And obviously, these are things that the investor will look out for. But I can tell you that we need this money badly. But you see, let me come back to, the permanent revenue enhanced measures that we try to put across. You realize that, in the IMF program, we had about, 9 itemized permanent revenue enhanced measures, which, by May of, this year, we're supposed to implement all of them. And that is why I keep on emphasizing that the electric vehicle, what do you call it?
Pass
Taxes that was
exemption,
introduced was more or less like a cosmetic kind of decoration on the budget because the budget is a cycle. Sorry, the taxes are for cycles. I mean, you are targeting certain revenue for a particular fiscal year. And so why do you put in something that, you cannot operationalize? So I think it's a way of deceiving, the public on when it comes to some of, these things. But we need the IMF money badly, and we cannot afford not to get it because it's going to have, a serious impact on our economy. And you remember, this country, the economy is an import-driven economy. Every item you see on the shelf, has an import component. There's no way, if it's a sobolo that is being produced, obviously the plastics, some of them are imported. So there's an imported component in our production, channels. And so you should expect that once we do not get these inflows, and it turns up that, government resumes, its debt service fully, right? It's going to have a serious impact. As we speak now, you see, the finance minister in the budget boasted of stability in the exchange rate, and I was asking myself, how do you boast of stability when you've not resumed a full capacity
external debt payment
for the dollar? As we speak now, external, debt service is in suspension. And so if you look at the agents who are supposed to demand the dollar on the market, we look at individuals, right? We are looking at businesses, and we are looking at the government, which is the bigger demander of the dollar. So, and if the bigger demander is not on the market to demand the dollar, you cannot boast of stability. Let's wait. If we resume our debt service, right? Government is demanding the dollar. Businesses are also operating fully, requesting the dollar to meet Christmas season pressures like what we're going to have as we're moving now into Christmas. And then individuals are also demanding. Then you can talk about the actual level of, the exchange rate. So we need IMF money to show up, and then the cocoa syndicated loan as well, And I'm surprised to, you see, the budget did not mention, anything on cocoa syndicated loan, because of the problems we are having, So I was surprised to, George, some time ago, I used to boast of how Cocoa Board was able to borrow at 2%, whilst, the country Ghana, within which, Cocoa
doing
Board
about 9, 10%, 15%.
Around 7%, So that shows that the cocoa, syndicated is a kind of a sure investment for the investor. So the credibility was even more than the sovereign country Ghana, So at what point did we get deteriorated to this level where, Cocoa Board is struggling to raise, money from the market? So from where I sit, I think we need this foreign inflows badly, and these are the main risks that faces us. And it was admitted in the budget. I think one of the lines, talked about paragraph, talked about the headwind, risk that we are likely to face. So we should do all we can to bring in, this 600 million.
And Prof, since you mentioned this Forex CD issue, I know that you are in the academia. Maybe there's been some research that you have supervised and all the rest. Help educate me a little bit. Is it that the demand outweighs supply? Because during Christmas as well, we have a lot of people returning to the economy, bringing in Forex as well. So is it that demand outweighs supply? Because when there's pressure on the currency in December or in the festive season, well, those, we heard even from recently from ISET that when these foreigners come in, they spend on the average about $2,700 in this economy. So where are all these hard currencies going if it's not fed into the banking system?
Right. So at the point where the economy got deteriorated, where the trust in the CD, went down completely, people were, using the dollar as a store of value. I've mentioned it some time ago, and it's still clear. To the extent we had to get, about millions of dollars in somebody's house, So effectively, it tells you that the dollar in itself is like a gold, keeping gold in your house. And in itself can also be a factor why there's always pressure on the demand, not necessarily to transact. Bank of Ghana can bring about the regulations or the restrictions and all those, but it won't materialize. The underground market, which is the black market, in some cases are even more active. And let me tell you, there's a strong link between the formal market of the dollar and then the black market.
Okay.
The formal market, yes, there's a strong link. I can tell you that there are some insiders within Bank of Ghana who relays information to the black market and they trade on that. So when the dollar is about to go down in there, they tell the black market.
That's alleged, right?
No, but look, it's happening. I mean, that's somebody's. Let's do our investigations and get to know the owners of forest groups in this country.
Okay.
You know, it will marvel you that a lot of people who owns, forest brews are people who are working in the formal sector. So effectively, I mean, it tells you that there's a fine thin line between, these two, areas of, the forest market.
And Prof, time is not our biggest partner here. Your final thought in 30 seconds going forward into 2024, i.e. this budget and businesses, in 30 seconds or in a minute, Prof.
Well, I can tell you that the budget, has nothing to offer to businesses because the budget cannot bring interest rate down and it cannot fight inflation. And I mentioned earlier in my submission that clearly interest rate structures will still swell up because of the way and manner we've packaged this budget, if we should go strictly by it. And then the election year, the way the expenditure structures have been aligned, looking at, goods and services, and then also capital expenditure with the way we've swelled it. It tells you that government is ready to spend more on social, investment, and then also infrastructure.
Okay. You're allowed to 30 seconds here. Your final thoughts, outlook going forward. 30 seconds.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think in my view, we have a second opportunity to operationalize the budget in a manner that will benefit business and individuals. And so I'm quite excited that TUC or even the labor union is getting 23% increase in salaries, but I'm expecting other benefits to other private operators where we have a lot of people in employment. If you support business, you'll be able to employ more people and keep people in jobs. So I am expecting government that in operationalizing the budget, they have an opportunity to amend and get some of the things that they didn't get right. Thank you.
Yeah, Obialate's partner at accounting firm Deloitte, Professor Lord Mensah, he is a financial economist. These two distinguished gentlemen were doing some analysis for me whether the budget can be described as business-friendly or not. I know the debate will still go on in your homes and your offices about what this budget presents to you if you're a businessman out there, an enterprise out there, and all those challenges that presents to you in 2024. My name is George Yafe. Have a great day.